Hello, Canucks fans, and welcome back to another episode of Canucks Conversation live. Like I said, from a Penticton patio. My name is Dave Quadrelli. That is Harman Dial, and Canucks management just spoke. Like we're in the thick of it now. It has begun. The Canucks season, in my mind, has begun. I know games haven't started, but this is the kickoff. This is what we've been waiting for. We got some updates. We're gonna dive into it all. We're gonna get your thoughts, and we're going to talk about it. We're going to talk about it. This is Canucks Conversation, and it is brought to you by our friends over at Greta. Greta is a great spot for all games, home and away. We will be there for Canucks Army viewing parties throughout the season, and details on that are coming soon. It's just minutes from the arena. Come by before or after the game, or whatever event you're downtown for. With weekly drink specials, Greta Bar YVR is the place to be. 50 West Cordova Street. Let the games begin. Okay, Harm, your main takeaway from Patrik, Allvin, Jim Rutherford, and Rick Tocchet speaking today at the South Okanagan Event Center, which isn't a BCHL rink. That place is beautiful. But anyways, your thoughts?
Yeah, honestly, right off the top, it wasn't even anything that we asked. Patrik Allvin opened with a statement and, of course, welcomed everybody to the 2024-25 Canucks season. And then enlisting the players that weren't going to be available for day one of training camp, a couple of interesting nuggets there, right? Teddy Bluger right off the bat. Sounds like he'll be out for about a week, Allvin said. Yeah. So that came as a bit of surprise. We weren't necessarily expecting that. He had a minor procedure on his lower body. So we'll talk about the implications there. And then in terms of Thatcher Demko, not surprising that, okay, he's missing day one of training camp, but no update on him. Allvin just saying that Demko wants to address the media tomorrow to discuss his injury situation.
So let's talk about that. I found that one really interesting. Thatcher Demko wanting to meet with the media, and Allvin even going out of his way and saying, like, Thatcher requested this. Like, this is something that Thatcher Demko wants to do, is he wants to be the one to deliver the message. We're not going to sit here and speculate what that message could be, but we are going to get an update from Thatcher Demko from the horse's mouth. Remember I said that a week ago, and I said, well, I guess he's not going to give us the update. He is giving us the update. I wasn't expecting it, but Thatcher Demko is going to come out tomorrow, and he wants to give the update. So again, Canucks fans everywhere are going to be hoping that that is a positive update and that it's a short absence. But as we kind of go through this list here, like you said, we've got Bluger. We already knew about Joshua. We talked about him. We're obviously wishing all the best for Dakota Joshua, but Teddy Bluger is going to be absent. And again, like it's just a week, but who's going to fill that role? And that's something that Rick Tocchet spoke about, is like, who's going to get those opportunities out of camp? Is it going to be a guy like Aatu, right? A guy we've been talking about lately. Like, who's going to get to play with some players that maybe they wouldn't have played with on day one of camp? We know injuries are going to happen throughout a season. When you have injuries at training camp, you get to see who the coaching staff is kind of thinking about in those roles. So I found that one interesting. Like you said, Cole McWard as well. We knew somewhat about Mick Ward, but him as well. A week-to-week injury. Sounds like it's going to be a little bit longer than Bluger. There was different phrasing for Bluger and Mick Ward. But for Teddy Bluger, like, let's talk about that. Because, again, we're not talking about, okay, what does it mean for Teddy Bluger? Because he's going to be back in a week, it sounds like. But for the guys that are going to get that opportunity, again, I bring up a guy like Aatu. What does it mean for them coming into camp and maybe having that opportunity when they really weren't expecting it?
It's massive. It's an opportunity to make an impression. And the thing too is it's about a week. And if you remember going back to the start of last season, Bluger missed some time. And do you remember how the timeline, started as day to day, then went week to week, right? Like sometimes injuries take longer than you anticipate. So if you're, Nils Aman or Aatu and you're thrust into this position, you're not approaching it from the mindset of, well, Teddy Bluger is going to be back in a week, and so this isn't that big of a deal.
Exactly.
You're going to treat it like the opportunity of a lifetime, and I do think that it's going to say a lot about what this coaching staff thinks about these players in terms of who gets that opportunity, because I think you could make a case for three players, right? We mentioned Rontu off the top, who it sounds like the Canucks want to try and develop as a center, give him some rope there, but also Nils Aman. Here's a player that last year took a modest step, I think, compared to his first pro season in North America, but is still a bit of a tweener in the sense that, can he develop into an everyday NHL player? Because he has the reach, he has the size, he even has the mobility, but can he be stronger on his feet? I think he took a step towards that last year, but also on faceoffs, right? If all of a sudden he's a guy that can come into camp and he is even average on faceoffs, you combine that with his defensive IQ, can help on the penalty kill, then you can also make the case for him to get an opportunity there, as you can make the case for Max Sasson, who has been unbelievable in Abbotsford. You talk about all the guys in the AHL last year that maybe didn't get an opportunity with the big club. I think Sasson's right at the top of the list in terms of guys next up who probably deserved an opportunity. Sasson was, I thought, really impressive at Young Stars, as you would expect for a 24-year-old. And with his pace, with his energy, with his competitiveness, and how much of a direct straight line game he plays, I'd be really interested to see him get a shot there too. So I think it'll say a lot in terms of who this coaching staff gives this opportunity to.
Got to give some love to Vilmer Ulrichsen, because you brought up Young Stars. Rick Tocchet name dropped Vilmer Ulrichsen. And again, like Stephen Ellis, our pal over at Daily Faceoff, named Ulrichsen one of the top 15 most impressive rookies across NHL rookie camps. So Ulrichsen's getting on a lot of people's radars. He was on mine early because he's 6'6", but he's on a lot of people's radars right now. And Rick Tocchet name dropped him. So what does he get in camp? Like, what kind of opportunities does he get? It'll be interesting. Canucks kick off at 9:30 tomorrow. We'll have another show tomorrow evening where we break down, maybe tomorrow afternoon, actually, if it's a morning afternoon sort of thing. We'll have another episode where we break down day one of Canucks training camp. Okay, Harm, I wanted to talk to you about another thing that Rick Tocchet said, and it was on this topic of opening up the system. And it's something we've talked about this offseason. We talked about it with the context of Thatcher Demko of, okay, do you want to open up your system? Maybe give up a little bit more defensively when you don't have a Vezina caliber goaltender in net. And that question wasn't specifically posed to Rick Tocchet, but he did talk about how there's going to be some teaching going on at training camp and how there are going to be some changes to the Canucks system. He hinted at it, is what I'd like to say. And he even said, I don't want to tell you guys everything right now, but we would like to play faster. We would like to do some things differently. So that was something really interesting from Rick Tocchet in my mind, was that he's talking about playing faster. He's talking about opening the system, getting the defense involved. He even said getting the defense involved and not just Quinn Hughes involved in the play, getting them up a little bit more. I'm really interested to see what the X's and O's look like, because we're going to see all that. We're going to see all that teaching. We're going to see power play work early, but specifically on the idea of opening up the system. And I don't want to say changing your system, because there's no fundamental changes really, right? On the topic of opening up your system, what was your thoughts on Rick Tocchet's answer there?
I thought it was really interesting, where it seems to be very specific, actionable, situational adjustments, as opposed to we're dramatically changing the foundation of our system, or how we break the puck out. I thought it was interesting that Tocchet brought up examples like when they went back in the offseason and the coaches looked at the video of why they maybe didn't generate as much off the rush opportunities where they could have attacked more proficiently. He brought up examples of how, maybe they'd break the puck out really cleanly and there'd be an opportunity to create a 4-on-2, but that the second layer of support wasn't aggressive enough, that they were maybe playing a little bit safe, and that gave the opposition an opportunity on the back check to kind of recover and even out the numbers. And that's where, again, part of it comes down to your defensemen, other than just Quinn Hughes, are going to need to be a little bit more proactive on that. And part of that's going to be a mindset shift. Part of that is going to be changing up how you read certain situations. And I'm also curious to see, like, when it comes to non-Quinn Hughes D stepping up into the rush a little bit more, do you have the right personnel for that?
Yeah.
Right. Do you have enough mobility? Do you have enough speed? And there is sometimes a bit of an adjustment factor where, okay, in those spots, if you are going to get your D to jump up into the rush a little bit, well, then now there's an even extra level of responsibility and trust on the forwards that you've got to manage this puck correctly. You really can't turn it over now, because in the past, if you turn the puck over at the offensive blue line in that situation, well, maybe your D are further back in the neutral zone, and they're still in a position where if you turn it over, you're not going to get burned for an odd man rush going back the other way. Or it doesn't even have to be a turnover. Like, it could be a sharp angle shot and you don't hit the net and it rims all the way around. The opposing team's weak side winger gets it, and all of a sudden they've got speed, and now some of your players are caught up the ice. Like, and this is where that responsibility and trust, even for the forwards, is earned, right? I bet you Rick Tocchet last year looked at something like that and went, well, we got to teach these forwards to reduce their like how many high risk plays they make before we can even think of the idea of let's get the D involved and maybe give these forwards more passing options in these offensive scenarios. So I'm curious to see kind of how that push-pull looks, where A, do they have the right personnel on the back end to take advantage of some of these opportunities? And B, now there's even more emphasis and trust and responsibilities on the forwards that they've got to make the right mature decisions.
A lot of content to get to. Folks, if you're new here, we're going to get to anyone else shortly. Anyone else is our segment where we take listener questions in the YouTube live chat. So make sure you get those in. Even if you're on Twitter, Facebook, watching the live stream, we will take your questions. So be sure to get those in to us in the live chat, and we will get to them during anyone else. There's a lot to get to here, Harm. And the one thing, and I don't want to say the one thing because there's 100 things. Something that I found interesting was Tocchet speaking about Pius Suter and how he views him as a center going into this year, even though he was used more as a winger last year. Like, we saw him on that line with Miller and Besser, a center, but again, he's a hybrid. Like, that's what Tocchet kind of said. He's going to start the year as a center. No real surprise there. I'm just curious who he plays with now.
I imagine, especially with Bluger out, it's a no-brainer. You have him with Connor Garland.
Mm-hmm.
And the more interesting question is who gets that opportunity on that left wing to play. If it is Suter and Garland together, who's playing third wheel?
You want to hear a pick?
Yeah, go for it.
Patrik Allvin spoke very highly of Sammy Blais. I asked him about the PTOs. Did you catch his answer on Sammy Blais? He spoke so glowingly about Sammy Blais. Didn't have quite the same enthusiasm for Dylan Ferguson, but hey, all the love to Dylan Ferguson. He's coming in on PTO. But with Sammy Blais, the way Allvin was talking about him, it sounds like he's talking about this guy as being a player that they're going to sign to a contract and have in their lineup. Like, that's the vibe I got.
Perhaps. I mean, if it was me, I'd want to give a guy like Kiefer Sherwood a shot there.
Yeah.
Because he, like, last year, it's not even close. Sherwood was a far superior player than Sammy Blais. And with Sherwood, he brings some of the speed, he brings some of the tenacity, but he's also got, and this is the key difference, he's got some offensive touch. Scoring 13 goals, I think it was, and 27 points in 74 games when you're only playing on the fourth line and you aren't getting any power play time is really impressive. And when you look at his rate stats, his production relative to ice time at 5-on-5, it was a really high number. And so it's like, okay, you crushed it in a fourth line role. Now there's potentially an opportunity further up the lineup. Could you be a player that earns that opportunity, especially because he's defensively responsible enough to where you don't have any question marks from that perspective? Look,
man, I'm not going to take victory laps if it happens, but you remember my next Dakota Joshua stuff from early in the offseason? I was saying it. We've been saying it at Canucks Army for a while that Kiefer Sherwood is the next Dakota Joshua.
Hold on. You can't take victory. Riley Tuft was your guy.
Okay, come on. But then they didn't sign Riley Tuft. Who is the other guy? I can't even remember his name. There's another one.
Wasn't it some Rochester?
Isn't that Riley Tuft?
No. Was it? I don't want to.
It's okay. There was another guy.
I'm on it, guys. I'll try and find that.
There you go.
Brett Murray? Was it Brett Murray?
Oh, it was Brett Murray.
Brett Murray.
That name rings a bell. That's a name you can trust. Is he over 6'5"?
You were before the Canucks signed Kiefer Sherwood. You were not on Canucks Convo.
Is he over 6'5"?
Pushing for Kiefer Sherwood. Brett Murray? Yeah, he's 6'5".
Oh my gosh, there you go. There's a name and a height you can trust. Okay, before we continue, I got to tell you that this segment is brought to you by our friends over at Mr. Lube. Mr. Lube and Tires Change Your Oil, Change Your Wipers event is on now. Visit MrLube.com to download your coupon for a free pair of Goodyear hybrid wiper blades with any oil change for a limited time at Mr. Lube. Find them at one of their 18 locations in the Lower Mainland. Do you want to just continue this conversation in anyone else? Like, we can involve the listeners. Do you want to just go right to anyone else? And we have our take still. Like, I still have a lot to say about this press conference and more to dive into.
Yeah, but before we get there, I'm just big picture as camp opens tomorrow. I'm curious to see what Rick Tocchet can do in an environment where now the players are in a spot where the expectations, the foundation, the core staples that he talks about have already been established. And he mentioned that I don't have to do the speaking on a lot of those things anymore. The players are holding each other accountable. Because if you go back and think about when Rick Tocchet first took over this team, like I was going back and reading some of the quotes. Here's an interesting quote to take you back to day one and what Rick Tocchet's mindset would have been in terms of working with this group of players and his priority. Quote was, "We're going to have to go back to grade school on how to defend and how to stop and start because too many guys are spinning. We're a very high risk team. Some of our better players today, they were just too risky for me." So this was before training camp last season, because obviously he took over late after Bruce Boudreau had gotten fired in the season previous. But it goes to show, like, Tocchet's training camp last year must have been so much just like fundamental. How do we defend? How do we instill the right structure and practice habits in this group? But with those elements now taken care of, now he can focus on optimizing more specific areas. And so what is going to be the point of emphasis, right? Tocchet mentioned trying to improve the speed with which they transition, especially with the forwards that they added, specific areas like regroups and trying to play the puck to the middle a little bit more. But also, I'm curious to see how early are they going to start working on the power play, for example, especially with a new assistant coach in
Sounded
Yogi
like early.
Svechkovsky.
And he said JT Miller's really excited to get to that early. Like Rick Tocchet said that. And he said, like, the direct quote was, I'm not trying to kill these guys. And he dove into his, training camp philosophy, which we've seen a little bit of. He dove into that. And he talked about how I'm not going to bag skate these guys on day one. They've all done a skating test. A lot of them did it without the media there, sort of thing. And he said, I'm not trying to kill these guys, and we're going to do power play stuff early, and it's going to be education. And again, he talked about that player coach relationship where it's a two-way street, and that's something he's always preached. So we're going to see power play early, and I'm excited to see it.
Also, I have faith that the Canucks at 5-on-5 are going to play a relatively solid game. It's always special teams that when you go back and look at the start of Vancouver seasons, whether they've gone poorly under Travis Green and Bruce Boudreau, or really well last year under Rick Tocchet, it's always been the special teams that have driven the outcome one way or another, right? Before Rick Tocchet came in, it was every single year in October or in January, if you want to count the 56-game season, the PK was not just bad, but bottom of the NHL. And it was, no matter how well they played at 5-on-5, the PK couldn't kill a penalty to save their life, and the power play was mediocre. And so all of a sudden you're losing all these games at the start of the season. Whereas you look at last year, they came into things and their PK held down the fort early. And most importantly, that their power play wasn't just good. It was firing on all cylinders. I think it was number 2 in the NHL for a while, right behind New Jersey. So getting that man advantage on track is going to be essential to getting the offense to a point where they're scoring enough. Because when I look at this Canucks team and question marks and what do you want to see from them to have success and win games early, I have trust that they're going to defend well enough. But All-Star break right through till the playoffs, it was more, can they generate enough scoring chances? Can they score enough goals? And that's where the power play is going to be massive.
All right, let's get to anyone else. Presented by the Vancouver Canadians. The Vancouver Canadians thanks Seas fans for another great season at the Net this summer. If you're looking to guarantee your seat for all the action in 2025, please visit CanadiansBaseball.com or call 604-872-5232. And of course, we would also like to thank the Canadians for supporting us, especially through the NHL offseason. They're a great sponsor. We love the Vancouver Canadians. Okay, let's get to anyone else, Harm. I wanted to get to this one right off the top. I asked Jim Rutherford, because it had to be asked. I asked Jim Rutherford about the practice facility. I don't want to use the word promised, but he did joke and say, there's no point in me coming out and telling you that it's close, because it's not. And he basically said, I'm not going to offer an update until we have one, type thing. Yeah, there's nothing on the practice facility. It's going to be very hard for them to lock down a spot to build their facility. It has been for years, and I don't think that's going to change. And I think Jim Rutherford had a sense of, I even said, because he laughed as soon as I asked the question, and I just said, sorry, I had to do it. And he just laughed, and he said, no, I knew it was coming. I knew it was coming. I knew it was going to be asked. And of course it was going to be asked, but no update from the Canucks president on a practice facility.
Yeah, a little bit disappointing, because, I mean, not that it's a huge deal, but when, and not that it even cost them this offseason, but when players are looking at opportunities for where to sign and what's most convenient, practice facilities, players actually care, and they talk a lot about not just practice facilities, but little details day to day of for example, the types of meals players get, all sorts of facilities, the medical staff, the physios, all those little details matter in helping sort of recruit players. And again, it hasn't cost the Canucks to this point, because I think they're at a point now where they're competitive, and Vancouver's a pretty attractive city to live in, despite the high cost of living and the high taxes. But at some point down the road, you do want to see the Canucks be able to get that done, because it's just not an ideal situation to have them practicing out at, let's say, UBC or eight rinks when Rogers Arena is unavailable.
Okay, let's get to some chat questions here. Some concern in the chat about the Canucks losing some bodies. Is it going to be one of those years where last year there was a lot of good news and a lot of positive fortune their way on the injury front, and you open camp with a few guys on the shelf again? It's week to week. We don't know about Thatcher Demko. That's the big one. Like, obviously, that's the big one tomorrow. And I said we're not going to speculate, so I'm going to try my best not to. But I am really curious what Thatcher Demko is going to say tomorrow. Like, what happened to him this offseason? There was a lot of speculation. There's a lot of uncertainty. I'm curious how it relates to what was ailing him in the playoffs and that injury, if it's separate. Really, I'm really, that's the number one story for me right now heading into tomorrow. Yeah, power play, line combinations, you're going to watch for all that. But the biggest story heading into camp is that we don't yet know, and we'll know tomorrow, what's going on with Thatcher Demko. That, to me, that's the biggest story.
Zero doubt about that. And also just how insightful and deep is Demko going to get into it? Because sometimes players with injuries will tell you the bare minimum that you need to know publicly, and you're still left with questions about what it means for the future, or when a player comes back, or like, are we going to get answers, legit answers, insightful answers into, for example, how does it potentially relate to the injury he had during the playoffs, and him, and like what legitimately changed between, hey, he may have been medically cleared if the Canucks made it to round 3, versus now he's not ready for day 1 of training camp. So absolutely, that looms large over everything else that could happen at camp tomorrow.
Okay, this one from K-Town Chef, and this is what you were talking about when we were talking about Rick Tocchet speaking about the opening up of the system, the defenseman going up in the rush, and you kind of dove in on it. This one from K-Town Chef: do they have that player besides Hughes? That's great, but I don't know if Soucy, Myers, Forbert, and Desharnais actually scream offensive upside to get involved in the rush.
I'll be honest, right now, I don't think so. Right.
So training camp's for.
But also, I remember times last year where a guy like Ian Cole, for example, who is pretty intelligent, and a couple times he would pick a spot perfectly for when to join the play, and he would maybe rack up an assist. I can think of a game in the second half where I was actually in LA. I want to say it was maybe in March. He jumped up, and in a low scoring tight game, I can't remember if it actually led to an assist or just a great scoring chance, but I was like, man, it would be great if the Canucks could get non-Quinn Hughes defensemen to do this more consistently. But then later in the game, Cole jumped up in a similar fashion, but because the play went the other way, he just didn't have the foot speed to recover. And so it's like, that's where it's a double-edged sword, where do you have guys that can recover? Because what makes Quinn Hughes special isn't just, oh, he's got the offensive talent to convert in those situations. It's, if the play goes back the other way, he is one of the best defensemen in the NHL at pivoting and recovering, angling guys off, and making sure that it doesn't result in a chance against. Like, that's the magic about Quinn. And like, how many defenders do the Canucks have that plus level of mobility? And even with a guy like Tyler Myers, right? Myers has, I would say, for a big man, he skates pretty well, and yeah, he has some level of offensive chops. He produced around 30 points last season. He's a guy that you might look at and go, can he be the type of defender that joins the rush more consistently? But do you trust him to make those reads? Because he's excelled last year playing a more simple style where he isn't scrambling as much and chasing out of position. So if there's an increased responsibility of joining the rush a little bit more, can he add that to his set of responsibilities without compromising the simple, steady style of play that made him successful last year in a bounce back season?
Okay, we've got a lot of interesting stuff in the chat. The first one from Bob Bluger. Oh, Bluger. Talking about me and my look today. He said, look at this sunglass uncle. It was sunny before. I can take them off now. It's not that sunny anymore.
Well, it's sunny going right into my face and into the camera.
Do you want some sunglasses?
Yeah, actually,
you take those.
I'll take those. Yeah. There we go.
Yeah. You take those sunglasses. Producer Jacob Lazar, he's doing a great job with this outdoor setup. I'm a big fan of it. Okay, Harm, this is one from K-Town Chef. Originally, he said 85% power play, but he corrected it to 25. What would lead to greater success for the Canucks? A 25%, not 85. 25% power play or an 85% PK for the season? I'm sure there's a correct answer here. Like, there has to be a correct answer when it comes to how you defend at 5-on-5, historically, what a team does or what kind of success they find when they have a better power play percentage compared to penalty kill percentage. But I would say it would be power play.
Well, I'm curious. I'm trying to look it up right now. I don't know if the Wi-Fi is going to cooperate for me. But
you know what I'm thinking is what was their percentage in that year where they just got burned on the penalty kill every time?
Well, here's the thing. Like, as we discussed the power play, it's so interesting because it was so disappointing in the second half, and yet it was so dominant in the first half that when you look at the power play results for the season as a whole, on the balance, I think they were 11th in the NHL. I'm pulling it up right now. It seems like it might finally start loading, but I think they were around 25% on the power play anyway. And so if you're talking about an 85% PK, like that's elite level play. And when you think about the playoffs and how they had a bit more success, like that would be huge. Yeah. So they were 11th in the league, 22.7%. 25 would have them. Okay. That would have them in top 5 territory. That would be, I mean,
that's enough. Like that's enough.
That's enough.
Yeah. Like that's the answer, I think, is power play. Okay. There's more stuff here.
An 85% PK would require you being second best in the NHL, which, considering the personnel that they have, I don't know if that's a realistic leap. I think extracting more out of the power play
is more valuable for this team.
I don't want to say more valuable. It's just maybe more realistic.
Fair. But what gets them more success?
I mean, like if you're going to jump from 17th to 2nd on the PK, like that's going to get you more success than going from 11th to 5th on the power play.
Okay. All right. Maybe it's PK. All right. This is good. Nick Bocek.
Just because it's a bigger jump, right?
Oh, yeah, for sure. Nick Bocek, how annoyed are you going to be if Thatcher calls a press conference and then evades every question? I don't get the vibe.
He's not going to do that.
Going to happen.
No.
I really don't. This one from Multi in the YouTube live chat. Rasmus Andersson is a must-add player for the Canucks. I'll tell you, not to show you how the sausage was made or anything, but we played a game at NHL 24 when we got here. I picked the Calgary Flames because I was forced to pick them, and I'll tell you, Rasmus Andersson was really good for me.
Yeah, this is the level of expert analysis I expect from him.
Yeah, he can
pulling
dangle.
Up NHL 24.
He's so fast. I burned everybody on the Canucks with him. So
it's a wonder that you're still allowed to be on this podcast with insight like that.
Wait, I didn't even play against you. I was trying to chirp you, but I played Jacob. I beat Jacob.
Yes, you did.
2-0. I just wanted to get that.
Scored with Kuzmenko too. That was funny.
Yeah, I did a couple times.
And Jacob Markstrom absolutely robbed JT Miller in the final seconds. So
best.
There you go.
Okay. In all seriousness, Rasmus Andersson, a must-add player for this team. I did find this interesting because Patrik Allvin was asked about, adding players and how they went out and addressed issues that they felt were there. Again, Carson Soucy goes down. What do? They go get Nikita Zadorov right away. Are we going to see that this year with a guy like Rasmus Andersson? We don't know yet. We don't know. And obviously Patrik Allvin didn't come out and say, yep, we're going to go get Rasmus Andersson. He had nothing like that to say. But the one interesting thing that I did find was Jim Rutherford saying he thinks they have a better team at this time this year than they did at this time last year. Like, he likes their team more heading into this year than he did heading into last year when it comes to the roster construction. That's something that a lot of people disagree with when we were doing our free agency shows and our offseason shows. A lot of people felt that this team took a step back, but we've reminded people a few times, you're comparing the end of season roster after some trades compared to the start of season roster going into this year. If you compare the start of the roster that they had at this time last year compared to now, I do like it now more as well.
Well, the big change is how many guys internally took a step, right? Because think about where Brock Besser and Connor Garland were in terms of their stock at the start of last season compared to where they are today. With Brock Besser, at that point, he'd never even scored 30 goals before. With Connor Garland, remember at the start of the season, there were trade rumors that he'd maybe requested a trade and that the club was looking to shop him. The agent was involved. Now you look at those guys, and Besser's off a 40-goal season, and Connor Garland is one of their most important 5-on-5 play drivers, right? That internal level of growth, even for Quinn Hughes to go from, all right, you're a top 5 defenseman in the NHL to now you're winning a Norris Trophy. JT Miller, what a dramatic turnaround that was for him. Not just the point totals. Forget the point totals. We're talking about two-way driving play at center, winning matchup minutes, especially at the start of the season against Connor McDavid. Like, there were so many bounce backs, and a guy like Dakota Joshua taking a step. And so that's where, when I look at the number of players that had career best performances last year, how many of those guys can maintain a similar level and make sure that there isn't a significant drop off? Because if some of those players have, even if it's a modest drop off, that's where you're like, okay, then there's extra pressure on some of your external additions like Jake DeBrusk and Danton Heinen and Kiefer Sherwood to be that much more impactful.
What do you think of Tocchet's answer when you asked him that? Because I thought that was a really sharp question. You basically asked him what you just said about you had a lot of guys who had career years. You can't expect that again. So what do you do? And I really liked his answer. What did you think of his answer? Where, again, he talked about short goals, little goals for each guy. And if you have that standard for yourselves, you're going to be able to reach those short goals.
Yeah, I thought it was a really intelligent answer, especially around the idea of approaching chunks in smaller goals and really specifically citing how much of a leap they took last year, Brock and JT, in terms of not getting frustrated if the team had a bad game or if they had a bad individual performance, but also recognizing that he still thinks there's room for them to grow in that department. And if they can continue making progress in that area, well, that will lead to them maintaining a higher level of consistency. And it's not just with respect to point and goal totals, because look, chances are that JT Miller isn't going to top last year's point totals, like in terms of scoring even more, or that Brock Besser is going to score more than 40 goals. But let's say there are nights where the production isn't there. Can you at least be driving play? Can you at least drag your team into the fight? Help your team build momentum, control shifts, so that you're creating an easier environment for your other lines to hop on the ice and produce, sort of like what the third line did for the Canucks last year, right? Do you remember how many nights there were where despite how well the top six as a whole played, and specifically the JT Miller line, in the middle of the season, there were a lot of nights where that top two lines weren't going, and it was the third line that maybe they didn't score. Some nights they did, some nights they didn't, but they just every night seemed to bring that energy, bring that play driving element, which then seemed to spark the rest of the lineup. And it felt like, okay, everybody else is now able to skate downhill because this third line is generating so much momentum just from a play control perspective. So even if there's not more to unlock from JT and Brock from a production standpoint, is there more consistency you can see from a play control perspective that can make it then easier for, let's say, the Pettersson line to produce?
Okay. I'm trying to get to everything in the chat because people have a lot to say. And again, this is going to be a weekend where a lot of these questions that people are asking are answered. Someone asked if I run the Zephyr Epic YouTube channel. I can tell you, no, I don't. I don't know where that came from, but that's one question that was in the chat. This one from Bob Luger. He's asking about Heinen and Sherwood. He said, "Are both Heinen and Sherwood good shutdown players?"
They're both pretty trustworthy defensively. Like Heinen, again, he's different stylistically than Suter in some ways. I think Heinen is quicker, but similar sort of role where it's like this guy can play first line, this guy can play fourth line. It's going to be this complementary, low maintenance, support type player where you're not going to necessarily notice him on an every shift basis, but he's just going to quietly do his job every shift. And then Sherwood's a little bit different, where we only really saw him on the fourth line in Nashville last year. So when he does step up the lineup, and now all of a sudden, instead of playing bottom of the lineup competition, how do you stack up against, well, now you're playing middle six competition, you're going up against the other team's top six lines. And actually Sherwood got a little bit of a taste of that. Yep. In the first round series against the Canucks, because Andrew Brunette for some reason loved to use that Michael McCarron line with Sherwood head to head against JT Miller. And honestly, I thought that Nashville fourth line held its own considering the higher level of competition. So yeah, I'd say both Heinen and Sherwood, I don't worry about them defensively in the sense of like if you have to elevate those guys up the lineup, are you going to be able to trust them? I think you can trust those guys.
I think you can trust them. Another thing you could trust is that you're going to have a great time if you head over to the TELUS Canadian Championship on Wednesday, September 25th, with a 7 p.m. kickoff at BC Place. The Vancouver Whitecaps are hosting it, and the Caps are looking to three-peat as winners of the Voyageurs Cup, and will be taking on Toronto FC, who they beat for the Cup in an epic shootout in 2022. With a win, the Caps can book their spot into the 2025 CONCACAF Champions Cup. A free t-shirt is available for the first 10,000 fans and 50% off all beverages until kickoff, so get there early. Also, the Whitecaps are hosting a Toronto FC merch exchange for free tickets at the Caps team store on September 20th and 21st. Caps TFC TELUS Canadian Championship Wednesday, September 25th. The atmosphere at BC Place for Cup Finals is always unmatched, so get your tickets now. Check out whitecapsfc.com. Okay, quickly.
I'm trying really hard not to laugh
I was
because
just
in the
gonna
middle
say-
of your ad read, there's a dog a couple of houses down that is absolutely going at it.
Can you hear it on the stream?
I'm not sure if it was picking up, but
Chat, can we hear that?
Yeah, you'll have to ask the chat.
Chat, can we hear the dogs barking? Because the reason I bring this up is it's hard sometimes to get a dog to stop barking. That's what I've learned with
Oh,
Bert.
yeah.
Sometimes they're just like, no, you don't understand. When you tell them, no, it's fine. Nope, you don't understand. There's something that I need to bark at, and I'm going to continue barking. We didn't bring Bert. I thought I was going to maybe bring him to Penticton, but Bert stayed at home. Probably good that he stayed at home. We're getting a lot of work done, and we're gonna have a good night. People can't hear the dog.
At least this dog's not like, if it was my dog, guaranteed you would hear it, because sometimes
Yeah.
I'll be walking and if he's been let out in the backyard, I can hear him from like 3 blocks away.
Okay, so you have a Cane Corso, right?
Yeah.
Okay, so do people, when you're walking your dog, do they like go to the other side of the street?
I walk him at night.
Okay, same question. Do
I mean,
people
we
go to
don't
the other
really,
side of the street?
not really. No, I mean, I'll usually try and just go in quieter areas where we're not gonna see too many other dogs and too many
Yeah.
other people.
I have to avoid some dogs now. I can just tell.
Really?
Yeah, like sometimes Bert just. And for those that are new to the show, I have a little Cavalier Spaniel mixed with a poodle. I'm allergic to dogs, but anyways, he likes to bark and he likes to play.
Well, okay, so this
It's a
is
bad combo.
some of the smaller dogs are some of the feistiest ones, and I'm always just like, as a small dog, why, like, know your size?
I like to think it's because they need to try to prove that they're tough.
That's a really dumb idea, because
Well, I
if
think
it-
it's because they don't want to get messed with by the big dog. I say this as a short person. I'm just kidding. But you know what I mean? Like, I think that's
like
actually it.
you and Faber, you're
It's like
just
me and
like,
Faber. That's right.
You see each other in the street, you're just gonna start barking at Faber.
That's right. Yeah. We used to have a lot of jokes about Faber and I. How I would start all the fights and then call Faber in to finish them. That didn't actually happen, but we had a lot of jokes about that when we were a duo.
You're just like,
Speaking
hey,
of
I'm a
Faber,
little guy, you can't pick up.
hey! Speaking of Faber, I'm thinking he's coming here soon. I don't know. Hey, he's coming here soon. He's coming to Content House. He's gonna take part in the college football 25. We gotta get him on a show. We gotta get him on a show.
Someone, I forget who it was in the chat, so my apologies. They mentioned like right off the top, like we're gonna see Faber rolling down the street in a scooter or
Yeah,
something.
he did the scooter in Penticton.
Yeah, but
Maybe we gotta
no,
get some
I
scooters.
feel bad. I said I failed as a producer for not setting that up. Just having Faber two
Rolling.
minutes into the show go rolling right behind you guys.
Well, he's driving the Canucks Tundra right now. Like he's driving
Oh,
the Canucks
really?
truck. Yeah, he's telling me about it. He's driving the Canucks. So like we could theoretically, we'd have to block out all the logos, but we could theoretically have it parked right behind us. Anyways, okay. Is there anything else? Oh yeah, the bet of the day. Did you have anything else that you wanted to say before we close out? I mean, like, I'm just excited for the Demko update. Well, I guess excited isn't the right word. Curious. I'm painfully curious what's going to be said tomorrow by Thatcher Demko when he meets with the media, and we'll have that update on tomorrow's show.
Yeah, I don't really have much else.
I got something for you. It's our Bet 365. Bet.
Okay, speaking of that, time to take a victory lap. What did I tell you when you were starting to believe in the Mariners again? I was like, this is what sad franchises do. They disappoint you off the top. They give you just the smallest glimmer of hope, rope you back in, and then they're just going to crush you again. Like, don't fall for it. And then what was your bet yesterday? And then tell me what happened.
Yeah, I did take Mariners money line, and they lost 11-2. And it's close. The playoff rush is being close to being over. So anyways, let's get to our Bet 365 bet of the day. Thanks for that, Harm. Because I'm taking the Mariners once again at plus
you're
100 odds. You can go get,
No.
yes, Bryce Miller on the bump, Nestor Cortez for the Yankees. You've got Bryce Miller and the season on the line for the Mariners. They're not going to go down quietly. They're not going down quietly. I believe. Take the Mariners. Maybe don't, but this isn't advice. This is my bet of the day.
This is not financial advice.
This is not financial advice. Bryce Miller, the odds makers don't like the Mariners after last night's 11-2 loss. So take
Gee, I
them
wonder why.
at plus 100 odds, even odds to beat the Yankees and keep the playoff hopes alive. Plus 100, you can get that over at Bet365, a proud partner of Canucks Conversation. Open an account with Bet365 today and bet on a huge range of markets. Whatever the sport, whatever the moment, it's never ordinary at Bet365. Be sure to use code VANBONUS when you sign up for an account. Chat really liked that. Chat really liked you pointing out that the Mariners sucked yesterday. And it's funny that you did that because you don't know what my bet is going into it. And I literally had it ready to go. Like Mariners once again, we're taking the Mariners to take down the Yankees and keep the playoffs.
I sincerely hope nobody follows your advice when you pick the Mariners.
Must be 90+ play. Please play responsibly.
One more thing I wanted to point out, Harman, you got some love in the chat. Like they're like, I've never seen Harman like below the shoulders. He's got like biceps for days. The chat's
appreciate
loving,
that.
Chat's loving Harman right now.
Dan L. Yeah, he has to lift quads into every chair.
Got to protect the little guys.
You gotta protect the little guys. Okay. This is fun. I like the outdoor setup. Can we go outdoor downtown, Jacob? Back home?
Back home? Probably not. But
Parking
for
garage.
Penticton, this is
Parking
great. We'll
garage
see.
Canucks Convo.
I mean, we'll see. We were planning on doing most of the shows inside, but I think depending on the time of day we do it, we might be able to pull it off outside here. But at the very least, we got today's first one in, and I'm happy, even though I had to have my hand held up in front of that camera trying to block out the sun for about half the show. But it looks great right now, and we had a great audience. So thank you all for tuning in.
We're going to be doing Family Feud tomorrow, right? Okay, Family Feud tomorrow. So there's two things that I'm excited for tomorrow. Folks, we will see you tomorrow. For my co-host, Harman Dial, and our technical producer, Jacob Lazar, my name is Dave Guidrelli. Thank you so much for listening to the episode of the Canucks Conversation. Canucks Conversation is live Monday through Friday, every weekday at 2 p.m. over on the Canucks Army YouTube channel. Make sure you like, subscribe, and interact in the YouTube live chat every day with us, folks.